Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto anime review. This one's going to be for episode 166, which is called Deathmatch, and this was a really good episode. I think we expected it was going to be good because the animation from the preview last week looked very good, and it absolutely was. This was not going to be the sort of finale type episode of the arc. They're building to something bigger. The fact that everyone loses here, it is a complete and utter loss after sort of all this build up to going after the cell, for them to lose and now have to retreat. That's big, and we kind of haven't really seen that now. And especially with the preview for the next episode, it really looks like they're going to deliver on something quite good, even though this isn't the manga content just yet. But there is a need to develop, I suppose specifically Boruto and Sarada's skill, but I suppose Mitsuki as well. And I'm very excited to see what they do here, and how we're getting a training arc, I guess, coming up. But this one, I think what worked about it so well was that they didn't hold back with presenting Deepa and Victor as just being incredibly powerful. That Victor arrives on the scene, which I don't think we really expected was going to be the case, that he would just show up and it would be straight up 2 Kara members versus our team. And they split it up that Victor took on Mugino and Konohamaru, and then Deepa just had to deal with Boruto, Sarada, and Mitsuki. And I like how they sort of led you astray almost, because of course Deepa is really strong, you can't injure him. The stuff from his previous fights with like Amoy and stuff like that still play their role. That we know he has some sort of like hardened skin. They confirm in this episode that the way it works is that he is like consumed carbon and is able to basically X-Men Colossus style just make that carbon skin like appear whenever he wants for defense. I don't know if it's meant to be some sort of Kara like alteration type thing, or if this is just like some specialized Earth style jutsu, but either way I think it's a cool ability for him to have, and it explains a lot of the other fights sort of retroactively, like this is how he's able to like block a sword with his skin and so on, because he can make his skin as hard as carbon, which makes sense, especially just the way he described it. So again, a relatively like simple jutsu of just, it's a defensive like physical jutsu, but it seems to defend him against pretty much anything. And then his main offense, of course, is just that he's good at taijutsu, but then he can just send these I don't know, like were they meant to be carbon or metal cubes basically at people, and just because he has such amazing control over them, it's just this hailstorm of these like heavy cubes that they're either going to knock you out, break some bones, or cut you as they go by. So he seems like a massive threat to deal with, and I kind of like that they weren't just sort of like a Hail of Kunai. I like there was a sense of like the characters could take hits, but they didn't want to get hit by too many of them, so it allowed like them to really like injure Sarada, Boruto, and Mitsuki without like every single hit being super debilitating. And I think that's what you get from a fight with Deepa, that he's not going to like one hit KO or like our main characters, but he's so strong, he's pretty much just playing with them here. And I think it built up really nicely to, okay, we've got to do something. Boruto's Rasengan didn't do anything, and they're setting up the entire time that Sarada is beginning to analyze something with her Sharingan, and so they come up with the teamwork plan that usually works, or Mitsuki creates the distraction, Sarada gets in close, but she is also just a distraction to create the opening for Boruto, and he does like full power Rasengan, and it looks like they're about to do the typical, they've defeated the kind of villain of the week or whatever, but no, he acts like he's getting killed, but just smiles and it's just like, just kidding. And that was really good. Just the fact that he is so in control that he can take a full power Rasengan from Boruto and smile and just create this situation of utter despair for Boruto and just flick him away, and just the devastating impact of that flick. He kind of carbons up his finger and just flicks Boruto away, and Boruto's out. And they also got across just the seriousness of this really well, with Mitsuki having, of course, of everything, the most desperation move that we've seen, his Sage Mode, and he's obviously reveals that he's not meant to use it. It pushes his body to its limits, but he needed to do that to get them out of this situation. Otherwise, the only other thing possible is Boruto's Jogon, which they're very careful about when they don't use it, and so on. Similarly, Boruto's Karma Mark, I suppose we're not quite ready to reveal the full extent of that, but Mitsuki's Sage Mode is something that we know about and can be used for specific situations like this. He at least was able to, in that mode, deliver a blow that kind of sent him flying back. It was an extremely powerful lightning move, and Deepa was sort of smoking afterwards, and he's like, okay, that was at least something, but I didn't get the impression that he was exactly too worried about that. Maybe if Mitsuki's able to train in that Sage Mode, it will become a threat, but it highlights the level Deepa is at. And then on the other side of the story, Konohamaru versus the two Jonin. Victor versus the two Jonin. That was also very interesting, because they got across, of course, Victor, old guy, but he's part of Kara, but he also has this incredible speed and can make arms appear out of his back and can do all of these different jutsu. You don't expect him to be that type of ninja, but he is. And obviously, we've been through quite a bit. Our characters are sort of tired, exhausted after the massive chase that they've been through. So they're at a disadvantage going into this. But still, it didn't really seem like Konohamaru and Mugino had that much to go up against him. Again, they were doing some nice teamwork moves, some strong fire style jutsu from Konohamaru. But in the end, again, it was a complete and utter loss, which helps to get across that both sides of the story are kind of most elite, Genin, and also some skilled Jonin. Neither are quite good enough just yet to take down a Kara member. So it's going to set up, I suppose, this training arc going forward of they have to improve if they're going to go up against members of Kara like this. And we have to wait and see. Because I think Deepa is the character I think everyone's sort of focused on, of we're eventually building up to defeating him before we transition into the next manga arc. So what is going to be the power-up? It feels fairly obvious for Sarada what it's going to be. She's going to have to unlock the second and maybe third Tomoe of her Sharingan. But for Boruto, it's kind of even having read the manga, I'm kind of is there a specific jutsu that we're going to see him develop? I'm not entirely sure. But that's going to be the fun thing to see, the Boruto's interaction with the characters, what gets talked about, where the story really is actually going from here, because it's going to require, I think, everyone to build up their strength, because otherwise you think the characters that are going to be capable of actually taking down Deepa and Victor still remain sort of as Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura is probably going to put up a good fight, and it's pretty much our original Naruto characters who are the ones that you would feel confident about in the fight against these characters. But even some of them are going to struggle. The only characters you think that might have an easier time against Victor and Deepa probably are Naruto and Sasuke. But they of course are going to save them for the bigger Kara members as we get further through the story. So this is important. This sort of training for Boruto and Co. is to get them closer to the level that they need to be at. And so, like I said, their massive loss within this episode was important, I think, for them to experience. And that's why I'm actually very excited for next week to just see the reaction to this. It looks like it's going to be quite a heavy episode as both Sarada and Boruto reflect on such a big loss, such a gulf and difference between their strength and Deepa's strength, and what's gonna give them the confidence to train and feel that they can get to that level. And then I suppose, how are they going to set up the next stage of the fight? Because we ultimately, I suppose, have to deal with the fact that the Kara now have the Hashirama cell. So there's going to be some time, I suppose, as they do the research on it. But they're going to have to work relatively quickly to stop them from getting the benefit out of the Hashirama cell. So that's at least the sort of time crunch on all of this. But like I said, they're actually at a point in the story now where I'm not entirely sure where they're going, where it was fairly obvious and sort of blunt where they were going before. Now it's much more open. I suppose the last point is the end of the quadruplets, the Haze Shinobi. To be fair, they did sort of go out very quickly at the start of this episode. Like, I appreciated them continuing their plot from the last episode of, okay, this one survives, doesn't go ahead with his sacrificial jutsu, and he almost feels guilty about returning to his older brother, having survived when his other two siblings did sacrifice themselves, but ultimately he's just happy to have one of his other brothers still around. But like almost immediately after this, when they're planning what to do, Deepa comes in and pretty much straight away like kills the younger brother, and it leaves, of course, the older brother as the only one left. And we do get to see his big jutsu, which again is another thing that gives the distraction for Mitsuki to sort of come in. But his jutsu was just that, like, he activates the sort of the mark, and then he seemingly just like makes himself explode in this sort of like red tornado. What was it, like red lily attack or something like that? And Deepa just completely, takes the damage. Like, it doesn't really seem to do anything. He notes that, like, oh, that could have destroyed the Hashirama cell, but you're lucky that it didn't. So it felt a little abrupt for that side of the story to end so bluntly, in that we didn't actually get the full explanation about like what the Land of Haze wanted the cell for, and now they're all dead. I just felt like something was missing from their arc, in that it was emotional to see the last brothers make the sacrifice, but without the full explanation of like why they're so intent on it and like what the Haze even wanted the cell for. It takes a little bit away from it and makes it feel like, okay, the actual important characters are in the story now. We don't need you anymore. But it is also a signifier of, we are now sort of much more laser focused on the important parts of the story, which is basically Leaf Shinobi versus Kara, and that's what we're building towards. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.